So, hi again, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. And for those who weren't in the previous presentation, my name is Vasilia Karasava, and this is some work that I did with Dr. Adolphe Forth at Carleton University. In this presentation, we are going to delve a little bit deeper into the victimization of the non-consensual dissemination of nude and intimate images, and we're going to have a discussion about the term revenge pornography and why it might be a misnomer. Now, again, for those who weren't in the previous presentation, the term image-based sexual abuse refers to the non-consensual creation, distribution, or threat of distribution of someone else's nude or sexual images. Now, this is a quite wide term, and under this umbrella, a few behaviors fall under, including cyberflossing, or as it's best colloquially known, dick pics, upskirting or downblousing, which kind of explain themselves, the creation using algorithms of pornographic material, also best known as deepfake pornography, and the non-consensual dissemination of intimate images, aka revenge porn. So, as a term, revenge pornography is not really ideal. First, it's very restrictive, both in the type of perpetration that it describes as well as the motivations behind it. It paints this picture of an ex-partner who is going to leak their partner's nude or sexually explicit material to get back at them. But what about all those people who leak those pictures for other motivations, like for example to gain notoriety or for their own personal entertainment, for financial gain, or to extort the victim in one way or another? At the same time, but not explicitly mentioning that it's a form of abuse and sexual violation, it takes away from the impact on the victim. And finally, and most important in my opinion, it's victim blaming. It makes you think from the get-go, what did that person do to deserve what happened to them? What happened and the perpetrator was pushed to their limit in order to leak those pictures? The word revenge there sort of implies that the victim has done something to deserve what happened to them. But the truth is, no one deserves this to happen to them. Previous work has found that individuals who have had their nude or sexually explicit images leaked online were more likely to have symptoms of anxiety, depression, PTSD, and there have been many notable cases where victims have attempted or even completed suicide. Or as Brown put it, the endlessly circulating, sifting pixels affect real lives. Real humiliations and human pains are generated. Now, in this work, we set out to answer a few research questions. Our first was to gauge the prevalence in image-based sexual abuse victimization in a sample of young adults. So participants were asked if someone had ever distributed or threatened to distribute their nude or sexual image without their consent. At the same time, we wanted to look into the factors that are related with image-based sexual abuse victimization, and we looked into demographic factors, including gender and sexual orientation, personality factors, the dark tetrad, which is psychopathy, Machiavellianism, sadism, and narcissism, as well as certain attitudes related to entitlement, like sexual entitlement and aggrieved entitlement, and finally their own personal history with the perpetration of image-based sexual abuse. And our third question was, we wanted to explore the relationship between the victim and the perpetrator, and we wanted to explore whether or not it's really as restrictive as the term revenge pornography implies, and it is only focused on ex-partners or current partners that are involved in a romantic relationship. So for the prevalence, we found that about 1 in 3 in our sample had at least once ever in their lives, ever since they were 16, have someone distribute or threaten to distribute the sexual image, or both at the same time. Now, this prevalence of 1 in 3 might seem high, but it has been corroborated in previous research. At the same time, we also have to acknowledge that the publishing of someone else's nude or sexually explicit material online without their consent is illegal in Canada and has been illegal ever since Bill C-13 was passed in 2015. Now, since then, about 5,000 cases have been reported to the police, with a little less than 1,000 resulting in charges. Of course, we are not 100% able to extrapolate the results and generalize them in the entirety of the Canadian population, but our prevalence was really high compared to the number of cases that are reported, and there could be the case of underreporting at play, which would definitely be in line with other forms of sexual violence, where we also see a lot of underreporting, and future work should definitely look into the parents and facilitators of reporting image-based sexual abuse and other forms of technology-facilitated sexual violence. Next, we looked into the predictors of victimization. We found that men were 35% less likely to report victimization, which is also in line with previous work that has found that typically women are more likely to report victimization of face-to-face forms of sexual violence. We also found that heterosexual individuals were 40% less likely to report perpetration, which could be a derivative of LGBTQ plus folks being more likely to engage in sexting behaviors, which could then leave them vulnerable to future victimization of image-based sexual abuse. Now, we also found that individuals who score higher in a self-report measure of sadism were more likely to report victimization. And I want to be very careful with my language here, because I don't want to insinuate in any way, shape, or form that those individuals in some way evoked this behavior from the perpetrator. It could be as simple as they are more likely to engage in sexually risky behaviors like sexting, perhaps sexting with individuals that they have never met in person, or something like that, and that left them vulnerable to victimization. Finally, similar to what we found with the perpetration, where victimization was predictive of perpetration, we found that the history of perpetration was highly predictive of victimization, and those with no such history were 70% less likely to also report victimization. Next, we examine the relationship between perpetrator and victim and the genders. We found that amongst male victims, the split was 40% had a male perpetrator and 60% had a female perpetrator. On the other hand, amongst female participants, more than 90% had a male perpetrator and 9% had a female perpetrator. So again, it could be again a derivative of males being more likely to perpetrate this form of abuse. So we also looked into the relationship between perpetrator and victim. Now, those who reported that they had perpetrated a form of image-based sexual abuse at some point were asked about the relationship with the victim, and so did the victims. So in the first column, we have the responses of the perpetrators, and in the second column, we have the responses of the victims. Now, our results show that the relationship between perpetrators and victims is a lot more multifaceted and varied than the term revenge pornography would imply. Perpetrators, about a third of them, said that the victim was their ex or current romantic partner, and victims, about 60%, said that at least one person who had distributed or threatened to distribute their nude or sexual image was the romantic partner. We had higher percentages for friends, either online or in person, or family. And another interesting result that we found was that about 10% of the perpetrators said that the victim was a stranger, or that they didn't know who the victim was, which highlights how pictures that are posted online may be shared or reshared hundreds of thousands of times from multiple people that might not even know the victim. Now, based on those results, we argue that the term revenge pornography is a misnomer and we shouldn't use it anymore. Instead, we should focus on terms like non-consensual dissemination of intimate images that clearly describe the type of abuse that takes place, or image-based sexual abuse for the more umbrella term. Now, we also showed that this form of abuse may take place both in and outside of intimate relationships, which could hint that there are different motivations for the different contexts within where abuse takes place. So thank you all for your attention, and I am looking forward to hearing your comments and your thoughts and answering any questions you might have. Thank you.